I cannot believe that it is almost winter time. It is the end of November and we have winter and cozy Christmas coming up. So I am going to talk about the winter releases that I am most anticipating. And these are books that I found that are coming out in the months of December, January, and February. And these are books that interest me. There are plenty of other books that are coming out during this time that may interest you that I don't mention in this video, but these are ones that have just kind of piqued my interest. So I wanted to share them with you. I'm just going to give you like a brief little synopsis for each one, and then I'll tell you the release date and we'll talk a little bit about why it interests me. Now that I'm looking at this, these are all like January releases. I don't think I have any December releases, which is strange. I don't know if that is how I organized it or if there just weren't a lot of December releases because of the holidays and maybe book publishing doesn't have a lot of books that come out in December. I'm not sure, but I'll put a little note once I do some research about why I have no December releases on this list. So we'll start with January. So we have Coldwire, which is number 1, so it must be part of a series, and this is by Chloe Gong. I am guilty for having 2 Chloe Gongs on my shelf that I have not read yet, and I haven't read anything from Chloe Gong, but I feel like I'm gonna like Chloe Gong, so I just keep buying her books. So this is another book that has kind of interested me, and it says the first of a dystopian trilogy set in the near future where life has moved to virtual reality, following an ousted corporate soldier racing to clear her name of treason alongside the enemy who is truly guilty. So we don't know a lot from that. It's a dystopian. It's Chloe Gong. I feel like it's going to be well written, so I want to check it out. Wake Up and Open Your Eyes. And this is by Clay McLeod Chapman. That might be a horrible butchering of that person's name. What really interests me about this one is it says it is a relentless and emotionally charged social horror novel about a family on the run from a demonic possession epidemic that spreads through media for fans of Last of Us and When Evil Lurks. Noah Fairchild has been losing his formerly polite Southern parents to far-right cable news for years. So when his mother leaves him a voicemail warning him that the Great Reawakening is here, he assumes it's related to one of the many conspiracy theories she believes in. But when his own phone calls go unanswered, Noah makes the long drive from Brooklyn to Richmond, Virginia. There he discovers his childhood home in shambles, a fridge full of spoiled food, and his parents locked in a terrifying trance-like state in the front of the TV. I only read part of the synopsis, but already so far it sounds really interesting. It sounds really relevant to today's culture with, media and politics, but it kind of puts a horror, maybe like a zombie-esque possession spin on it. So sounds really interesting. I haven't read anything from this author, but that synopsis definitely piqued my interest. So I will definitely be checking that out. And I want to read more horror because I realized I don't read a lot of horror outside of October, and I do enjoy horror. So I need to read more. A Sea of Unspoken Things, and this is by Adrienne Young. Adrienne Young also did the book something June Farrow, the Unmasking of June Farrow. I just had to figure out what the other book I was thinking of, and it's called The Unmaking of June Farrow, which I feel like was pretty popular. I think it was a book of the month pick, so it was making the rounds. And this is another book by her, and it says that it is about the only thing James and Johnny Golden have ever had is each other. For as long as she can remember, James' deep connection with her twin brother Johnny has gone beyond intuition. She can feel what he feels. So when Johnny is killed in a tragic accident, James knows before her phone even rings that her brother is gone and that she's alone, truly alone for the first time in her life. And then it talks about how like her brother's possibly keeping secrets from her and she is kind of unraveling things that happened before his death. So it sounds really interesting. I was kind of interested in The Unmaking of June Farrow, but I kind of felt like from what the synopsis was, it reminded me of V.E. Schwab's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and I didn't love that, but a lot of people did, so I kind of thought maybe this was going to be a very similar book, and because everybody loved it, then maybe I wouldn't. So I didn't read that book, but this synopsis sounds much more interesting to me, and this might be my chance to try her out, so we'll see. And the next book we have is Home Seeking by Carissa Chen. I've seen this cover around and I think it's a kind of popular new release that's coming up. It kind of reminds me of Past Lives, the movie. If you've seen that, then you know. If you haven't seen it, then you should remedy that and go see it. This sounds like Past Lives to me, like second chance romance, but with adults and like older characters. I kind of don't love reading a ton of romance about young characters. I'm a little bit older. I'm in this time of my life where I want to read about people in times of their lives that is not their 20s, where they're just like, I'm 20, I'm lost. Like, I want to read about other age groups. Haiwen and Suchi are teenage sweethearts in 1940s Shanghai. Their childhood friendship has blossomed into young love, and they believe they are soulmates. But when Haiwen secretly decides to enlist in the army to keep his brother from the draft, their shared future is shattered. Their paths take them far from each other. With the exception of one pivotal chance encounter on the Hong Kong ferry in 1966, 60 years later, Haiwen, now in his late 70s, is bagging bananas at a 99 ranch in Los Angeles when he lifts his head and sees Suchi. As they rekindle their friendship, it feels like they might have a second chance to live the life they were supposed to have together. But the weight of the past lies with them at every moment, and only time will tell if they're able to forge something new. So it is like very, very similar to Past Lives. You know, childhood friends turned into, you know, crushes or love, and then separated for many years that come back together. So I love the sound of that synopsis. I'm definitely going to pick it up and give it a go. And I also like historical fiction. I enjoy historical fiction that spans decades into present time. So it sounds like something that would be up my alley. Sweet Fury by Sash Bishosh. Sauce Bishosh. I could be totally butchering that name. When movie star Lila Crane and her film director fiancé embark on a feminist adaptation of Fitzgerald's Tender is the Night, prompting Lila to enter therapy in preparation for her leading role, but in doing so she finds herself the victim in a deadly game of revenge in which everyone on screen and off is playing a part. A twisty, thought-provoking novel of construction and deconstruction in conversation with the works of F. Scott Fitzgerald and told through the lens of the film industry. Sweet Fury is an incisive and bold critique of America's deep-rooted misogyny. That sounds so interesting to me. If you've watched this channel or watched any of my other videos, you know that I love film. I worked in film for quite a long time, so kind of have a special affinity for film and filmmaking, and this sounds like it's going to have a little bit of that. I've seen this cover around quite a bit too, so I think it's probably one of the more popular releases coming out in January. The next book I have is All the Water in the World by Irene Kafal. I remember seeing this cover and seeing that title and being immediately excited about it. I love books that have water on it. I love the idea of water because it's so mysterious to me and like unexplored. I mean, talking more, I guess, about the sea, but I love like water themes, and I don't know. I like water. What can I say? This one sounded super interesting. It says, all the water in the world is told in the voice of a girl gifted with a deep feeling for water. In the years after the glaciers melt, Noni, her older sister, and her parents and their research friends have stayed behind in an almost deserted New York City, creating a settlement on the roof of the American Museum of Natural History. The rule, take from the exhibits only in dire need. They hunt and grow their food in Central Park as they work to save the collections of human history and science. When a superstorm breaches the city's flood walls, Noni and her family must escape north on the Hudson. They carry with them a book that holds the records of the lost collections. And then it kind of keeps going on, and it says, they are determined to find a way to make a new world that honors all they've saved. So I love the idea of this. This is very dystopian. Climate change has changed the geography of the world and how people are living in the future and trying to preserve all of this history that it's obviously getting washed away and trying just to survive. This reminds me a lot of The Light Pirate. I loved that book. I read it earlier this year and just absolutely loved it. It was such a surprise read for me because I hadn't heard a ton about it. If you haven't checked out The Light Pirate, please check it out. It's very much similar, where water is coming in and taking over land that people are living on, and people are having to keep fleeing, and it's just getting worse and worse with climate change. So this sounds so interesting, and the fact that they are on top of the American Museum of Natural History and what they preserve from there and what they take. It just sounds like a really interesting premise. So that one immediately grabbed me. I'm really excited to pick that one up. And then we have Is Immortal by Sue Lin Tan. I read that this takes place in the same world as Daughter of the Moon Goddess. And I read that duology. I finished that duology this year. I started it, I think, last year. Really enjoyed those books. I think they were a debut duology for this author. And I loved the world she built. I loved the characters. I thought it was really unique, or at least it was unique to me and from what I've read. She writes very beautifully. And so I guess this takes place in the same world as that Moon Goddess, but it's a different story and it follows a different set of characters. I don't want to get too much into it because it actually sounds very similar to the Daughter of the Moon Goddess. It's like a young girl that has gifts or talents, and she has to basically save the world and people that she knows in kind of an immortal realm, so to speak. So sounds super interesting, sounds very similar to what she's written. I did enjoy what she's written before, so I'm sure I would enjoy this. So I threw that on there, and it has a beautiful cover just like her other duology has. So the next release date I have here is January 14th, and the first book I have on here is called Confessions by Catherine Airy. And this is a debut. For fans of The Goldfinch and Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, an ambitious and absorbing debut that follows 3 generations of women from New York to rural Ireland and back again. A multi-generational novel that follows 3 women across multiple decades and 2 countries. So basically it's just like a multi-generational story following these women from New York to Ireland. I like those kinds of books, so I definitely want to check it out. I don't really have much else to say about that one. Next we have is The Favorite by Lane Fargo. I remember seeing this one and being super interested. The cover looks really cool, but the premise is a love story between these 2 professional ice skaters, and I think they are like a duo. It says an epic love story set in the sparkling savage sphere of elite figure skating about a woman determined to carve her own path on and off the ice. She might not have a famous name, funding, or family support, but Katerina Shaw has always known that she was destined to become an Olympic skater. When she meets Heath Rocha, a lonely kid stuck in the foster care system, their instant connection makes them a formidable duo on the ice. Clinging to skating and each other to escape their turbulent lives, Kat and Heath go from childhood sweethearts to champion ice dancers, captivating the world with their scorching chemistry, rebellious style, and roller coaster relationship, until a shocking incident at the Olympic Games brings their partnership to a sudden end. So I have many Roman empires, but one of my Roman empires that is very niche and very random is, especially because I'm American and I'm not Canadian, is the Canadian skate duo Tessa Virtue and Scott Moore. They are a Canadian ice skating duo that did really well for Canada. I think in the early 2000s, they were kind of like the Olympic skate duo to beat. They have so much chemistry on the ice, and then there was rumors that maybe they had dated off the ice, but they basically grew up together as an ice skating duo, went through this whole journey together. And I just loved watching them on the ice. They're retired now, but they were so fun to watch. They had so much chemistry on the ice and arguably off the ice, but they're, married to their own significant others. But it's so fun to watch them. If you haven't checked out their Moulin Rouge, dance choreography or skate choreography, you have to, because then you'll see what I'm talking about. But anyways, I went on kind of a long tangent there, but basically they remind me of the synopsis of this book, and I kind of wanted just to read it with them in mind to kind of, fulfill that that weird niche obsession of mine. So anyways, I wanted to read that one because of that, and it sounded really interesting. Water Moon by Samantha Soto Yambao. And it says, a woman inherits a pawn shop where you can sell your regrets and then embarks on a magical journey when a charming young physicist wanders into the shop in this dreamlike and enchanting fantasy novel. Okay, sorry if some of these synopsises don't sound like they make sense. They obviously don't edit any of these synopsises, so they're written kind of poorly sometimes. This one just had a really pretty cover. It almost looked like a graphic novel cover, and that's kind of what grabbed me. And then I liked the idea of like selling your regrets to a pawn shop, so I'm going to check that one out for sure. And then this one I've been kind of anticipating for quite some time, and it is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. I've noticed that I was first introduced to Grady Hendrix with the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. I loved that book. It was so surprising to me. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was so smart, so funny. The characters were great. It was kind of scary, fun, like reading experience, and I always look back on it fondly. And then every book I've read after that from Grady Hendrix, I have not really enjoyed. And I've been kind of chasing that high from him because all the other books I've read from him, they have the same kind of like writing style, but the story or the characters or something just don't hit me the same way. So I feel like this might be my last Grady Hendrix I try, because if I don't like this, then maybe I just don't. Maybe that was just kind of a fluke that I really loved that one book and I didn't like all the others I've read from him. So I'm really hoping I like this one. I've heard really mixed reviews of people who have already read The Ark. I think if you go in thinking it's going to be a horror, scary story, you'll probably be disappointed. I think it more has to do with the occult and feminism and maybe kind of more of a social commentary versus a horror book. So I think sometimes he gets slotted into horror, even though he has horror elements, but he doesn't really write just horror. I'm excited to read this. I like the premise, but if I don't like it, it might be my last Grady Hendrix for a while. January 21, and the first book I have on here that I'm really excited about is We Do Not Part by Hong Kong. She is a South Korean writer and she won the Nobel Prize for Literature this year. She really writes kind of weird books that have a commentary on a lot of commentary on like misogyny. So she definitely writes about social issues and puts them into her books, and they're kind of weird, but I enjoy them. I've actually only read The Vegetarian. I have her other book, Human Acts, on my TBR that I'm hoping to read by the end of this year. And this one is going to be her newest release. And it says a woman travels from Seoul to a remote island to care for her friend's pet bird. As a snowstorm sets in, she discovers troubling news about her friend's family. We Do Not Part is a hymn to friendship, a eulogy to the imagination, and above all, a powerful indictment against forgetting. Like a long winter's dream, these beautiful pages form much more than a novel. They illuminate a traumatic memory buried for decades that still resonates today. I will definitely be checking that out. Also, her books aren't super long. They're pretty short, so you can get through them pretty quickly. I would definitely give her a try if you haven't read anything from her. And then we have Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. This is the third book in the Empyrean series. If you are not familiar, the first book was Fourth Wing. And so I read Fourth Wing when it was really hyped up on TikTok and really popular, so I picked it up and read it. I enjoyed it. There's a lot of flaws and a lot of similar themes and stuff going on, but it was fun because I was able to join in on the hype with everybody else. So I read the second book, which was, what was it called? I can't remember. And so this is the third book, and this has been very highly anticipated. I'm excited to pick it up. I kind of want to see where she's going to go. I felt like the problem with the second book was the first book was so popular that she really pushed and got pushed to finish the second book, and it got put out into the world way too soon. I think there could have been a lot of editing done. So because she had more time with this book, hopefully she's kind of had more time to edit and figure out where she wants to go with the story. But it is coming out on the 21st. I don't think there's much more to say about that one. I think this is going to be a 5-book series. So this will be the middle child of that series. English Problem by Bina Kamlani. This one sounded really interesting to me because it is about a boy or like a young man who gets sent to London by Gandhi to, I think, like learn English rule and law. And then he's also put into an arranged marriage. And so I think he moves to England to learn the ways, ends up falling in love with London and England. And I think he kind of has this little bit of traitor syndrome going on internally about liking the country that has colonized his home country. I didn't want to read the whole synopsis because it's pretty lengthy. The Lamb by Lucy Rose. This cover is giving something. I don't know what it is. I feel like it's giving like weird girl literature. You know what I mean? So this one says Margot and Mama have lived by the forest since Margot can remember. When Margot is not at school, they spend quiet days together in their cottage waiting for strangers to knock on their door. Strays, Mama calls them. Mama loves the strays. She feeds them wine, keeps them warm. Then she satisfies her burning appetite by picking apart their bodies. I'm not going to read any further. You get where this is going. It's weird girl books, and I do tend to be attracted to those kinds of books, even though I don't tend to love them when I do read them for the most part. But this one, the cover and just that little synopsis has got me intrigued, and I think this is going to be a very popular book. Okay, so now we have Junie by Erin Crosby Eckstein. This one had a really pretty cover. That's kind of what grabbed me at first. It says 16 years old and enslaved since she was born, Junie has spent her life on Ballerine Plantation in Alabama, cooking and cleaning alongside her family and tending to the white master's daughter Violet. Her daydreams are filled with poetry and faraway worlds, while she spends her nights secretly roaming through the forest, consumed with grief over the sudden death of her older sister, Minnie. When wealthy guests arrive from New Orleans hinting at marriage for Violet and upending Junie's life, she commits a desperate act, one that rouses Minnie's spirit from the grave, untethered to the world unless Junie can free her. As she grapples with an increasingly unfamiliar world in which she has little control, she is forced to ask herself, when we choose love and liberation, what must we leave behind? Sounds like it has some magical realism in it, maybe some fantasy element with her sister's ghost coming back into the world, and I love the sound of that one. It sounds so interesting. So I'm definitely going to try and pick that one up and see how it goes. Next I have Isola by Allegra Goodman. I feel like I've seen this author's other stuff, but I haven't picked anything up. I think it's kind of about a woman who gets marooned on a small island with her lover. And I think she was kind of like a wealthy or privileged, a person coming from privilege. So it sounds like a survival story in a historical fiction context. So I don't know. Something about it's kind of speaking to me, so I'm going to check that one out. Then we have Griff by Ali Smith. This is one of those authors that I have seen her books. I've read the synopsis about them, and she really intrigues me. There is a ton of authors that really intrigue me that I have on my mind that I would like to try reading them, and I feel like I would like them, and she is one of them. She has that quartet series out. I think it's seasonal quartet, and it's like one book is each season. I think she has like autumn, winter, spring, and summer, and I definitely want to check those out. And this is her new book. This one sounds very different from those ones. It says, an uncertain near future, a story of new boundaries drawn between people daily, a not very brave new world. Add 2 children and a horse. From a Scottish word meaning a transient moment, a shock, a faint glimpse, Glyph explores how and why we endeavor to make a mark on the world. In a time when Western industry wants to reduce us to algorithms and data, something easily categorizable and predictable, Smith shows us why our humanity, our individual complexities matter more than ever. So seems like a genre-bending, sci-fi, dystopian type story. It's probably going to be a little weird, but I love that it's kind of commentating on how technology cannot replace people. And so it sounds really interesting. I definitely want to check that one out. I don't know if it'll be my first Ali Smith because I have been eyeing the seasonal quartet and I have been wanting to try reading that. But if I don't get to that by then, this may be my first Ali Smith book. Next we have Lightfall by Ed Crocker, and this is Everland's trilogy #1, so it must be the first book in a new trilogy he has coming out. I've seen his stuff, but I've never read it. It says, for centuries, vampires freely roamed the land until the Greys came out of nowhere, wiping out half the population in a night. The survivors fled to the last vampire city of First Light, where the rules are simple. If you're poor, you drink weak blood. If you're nobility, you get the good stuff, and you can never ever leave. And it just keeps going on, but I think it is an adult book, because I don't really love reading YA fantasy, so it sounds like an adult novel with vampire and werewolf fantasy and horror. So definitely has my interest piqued. The next book we have is The Strange Case of Jane O by Karen Thompson Walker, another author I have not read but I've seen. In the first year after her child is born, Jane suffers a series of strange episodes: amnesia, premonitions, hallucinations, and an inexplicable sense of dread. As her psychiatrist struggles to solve the mystery of what is happening to Jane's mind, she suddenly goes missing. When she comes to, she has no memory of what has happened to her. Are Jane's strange experiences related to the overwhelm of single motherhood, or are they the manifestation of a long-buried trauma from her past? So it keeps going on, but it sounds super interesting. It sounds kind of like a unreliable narrator, a little bit, mystery. Thought I would give that one a try. Then we have Boy. This cover actually really grabbed me. It is by Nicole Galland. During Shakespeare's time, you had to be a man to be an actor, so they used a lot of young boys to play the female roles because their voices were still high and they still kind of hadn't obviously developed their more masculine features yet. So I think this is about someone who's trying to stay a boy, maybe. At the height of his fame, he teeters on the cusp of adulthood, his future uncertain. Often he wishes he could stop time and remain a boy forever. So anyways, the summary keeps going. It's a long summary, but ultimately I love historical fiction, so this really intrigued me and I loved that cover. So I am going to check that one out for sure. Okay, so those are the fiction books that I have kind of picked out that have sounded the most interesting to me that I'm looking forward to checking out. And then I have just like a handful of nonfiction picks here. I love nonfiction. I aspire to read more nonfiction. I enjoy it so much and I don't read enough. Hopefully, maybe that'll be one of my goals for next year, is to read more nonfiction and prioritize it more. So the first book I have here is Black in Blues by Imani Perry, and this cover takes the cake for the whole video. It is the most gorgeous cover. So honestly, that's kind of what drew me in. But then reading the synopsis, I was like, oh, cool. A surprising and beautiful meditation on the color blue and its fascinating role in Black history and culture. Throughout history, the concept of Blackness has been remarkably intertwined with another color, blue. In daily life, it is evoked in countless ways. Blue skies and blue water offer hope for which lies beyond the current condition. That blue is also the color of deep melancholy and heartache, echoing Louis Armstrong's question, "What did I do to be so black and blue?" In this book, celebrated author Imani Perry uses the world's favorite color as a springboard for a riveting emotional, cultural, and spiritual journey, an examination of race and Blackness that transcends politics or ideology. I'm really interested to read more about this topic, and the cover is beautiful. Next book I have here is The Harder I Fight, the More I Love You, and it is a memoir. I love a memoir. If you've seen one video of mine, I've probably talked about my love for memoirs. It is by Neko Case, and she is the singer and songwriter behind New. I've heard of her name, Neko Case, and that band. I haven't actually listened to her music, so I should probably check it out. Neko Case has long been revered as one of music's most influential artists, whose authenticity, lyrical storytelling, and sly wit have endeared her to a legion of critics, musicians, and lifelong fans. Case shows readers what it's like to be left alone for hours and hours as a child, to take refuge in the woods around her home, and to channel the monotony and loneliness and joy that comes from music, camaraderie, and shared experiences into art. Super interesting. Can't wait to pick that one up. Really have a hard time finding a memoir I don't like. I just love reading about people's lives and knowing that they're true and what people deal with and how they become who they are. I just love it. So excited for that one. We have Bibliophobia, a memoir by Sarah Chihaya. This one sounds like a perfect book for book lovers. Her life ruiner, Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, became a talisman for her in high school when its electrifying treatment of race exposed Sarah's deepest feelings about being Japanese American in a predominantly white suburb of Cleveland. But Sarah had always lived through her books, seeking escape, self-definition, and rules for living. She built her life around reading, wrote criticism, and taught literature at an Ivy League university. Then she was hospitalized for a nervous breakdown, and the world became an unreadable blank page. In the aftermath, she was faced with the question, could we ever truly rewrite the stories that govern our lives? Delving into texts such as Anne of Green Gables, Possession, A Tale for the Time Being, The Last Samurai, Chihaya interrogates her cultural identity, her relationship with depression, and the intoxicating, sometimes painful ways books push back on those who love them. It sounds like a perfect book for people who love to read and love books and use it as escapism and learning and relating. And it sounds so amazing. So I'm really excited to pick that one up. Then we have Memorial Days, a memoir. This is by Geraldine Brooks. Again, another one of those authors that I feel like I'm going to love that I have not read yet. I have one of her books on my shelves that I really need to prioritize next year. And she mostly writes fiction, I believe. And so this is a nonfiction, obviously. And this is a memoir. It says, many cultural and religious traditions expect those who are grieving to step away from the world. In contemporary life, we are more often met with red tape and to-do lists. This is exactly what happened to Geraldine Brooks when her partner of more than 3 decades, Tony Horowitz, just 60 years old and to her knowledge vigorous and healthy, collapsed and died on a Washington, D.C. sidewalk. 3 years later, she booked a flight to a remote island off the coast of Australia with the intention of finally giving herself the time to mourn. In a shack on a pristine, rugged coast, she often went days without seeing another person. There she pondered the varied ways which those of other cultures grieve. So it's definitely a book on grief and how different people in the world grieve. I love those types of books. I love a grief memoir, even though they make me cry, but I think I'm always secretly looking for the next book that's going to make me cry. So this one sounds amazing. I'm really excited for that one. So those are all the books I'm excited about in the winter. I obviously won't be reading all of those, but they are the books that I'm going to be checking out upon release. A lot of times I just borrow these books from the library, so I don't have to commit to buying them, and I kind of start reading them and see how they gel. And a lot of times I don't gel with them and I put them down and I don't end up reading them, but there's a lot of times that I find books that I absolutely love and end up finishing and buying my own personal copy. Just really excited for a new year of reading. I feel like I found a lot of books that I really loved in the beginning of the year. So I'm really excited again for the new year and excited for these new releases. Let me know if you have heard of any of these, if any of these intrigue you, if there's any that you're excited about that I didn't mention. I would love to hear about it and add them to my TBR. Thank you so much for being here, and please give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!